you ready to dream again? Let's embark on a journey together to uncover and discover your God-given dreams, ignite inspiration into your life, and empower you to pursue those dreams daily. If God's planted a dream in your heart, trust that He will provide everything necessary for its fulfillment. The right connections, the right people, the perfect timing for all of it, and more. Have faith, believe in yourself, and dare to dream big. Hi, welcome to the Dream Catalyst podcast. I'm Joan Daniels, and I'm super excited to have my personal doctor on for this podcast, Dr. Peter Cashio. So let me introduce him really quick. He was born in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, but his family very soon moved to Houston, Texas, and then to Southern California before starting high school, where he graduated. And he turned down a full ride chemical engineering scholarship. You're such a brainiac, Dr. Cashio. And instead enlisted in the U.S. Marine Corps. Like, how cool is that? And that became his tribe. And he was in Virginia Beach, Virginia, Okinawa, Japan, and Camp Pendleton, California, which all turned out to be amazing places. And then after all of that, he ended up getting a BA in biology at UT Austin, hook 'em, which I know you also
Right.
hook 'em, a Master of Science in Developmental Biology at MD Anderson, because I know how much you love to learn and research and all that.
Yeah.
He went to medical school at UT Health Science Center in San Antonio, residency training in emergency medicine, and board certification followed. And he has two boys. He's a single dad. I love that, and loves his boys. And he not only all of that, but his interests are so cool. He's interested in preventative care, men's health, mental health, pain management, medical cannabis, biohacking, and treating TBIs, traumatic brain injuries, which is my old stomping grounds. And he lives in Dripping Springs here. But really, the coolest thing is that he's the founder of the revolutionary Code One Concierge Care Holistic Health Center in Dripping Springs. So I'm so proud to have you on. Thank you so much for being
Thank
here,
you
Dr.
for that great
Cashio.
introduction, Joan. Appreciate that.
Yes. I had to
Yeah.
filter through your bio because you had so many good things in there, but I was like, what am I saying about him exactly? You have such an interesting background. So like you're like me, you love to learn. You obviously
Yeah.
love to learn. So tell us about that evolution. Like that's a lot. Marine Corps, college. I mean, and then how many degrees? 3, 4,
Three,
5, 3?
BA, MS, MD. Yeah, three.
3.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because frankly, my kids, when they complain about school, I always say, look, man, I graduated from like the 27th grade, so I really don't want to hear it, right? Well, I mean, so, I was in the Marine Corps, so yeah, you nailed it. I had a full ride. And I only say that as to like, and then I chucked it all away to go blow things up and have fun in the Marine Corps. Because I think that's just what I want, and a lot of young guys want to. And you want to sort of like, prove yourself. And then after that, though, I got kind of bored and was like, well, let's go to college. And then I was in college, and it was like an intellectual smorgasbord. I just was like, I could see myself being in college for the rest of my life, but practical things being practical. And I'm like, well, let's go specialize in genetics. And then I went to MD Anderson, and there, I'd always harbored the idea of being a physician, and we can get into that later. But um, it was in grad school. I was like, this is really cool, and it was like having the best intellectual frothy goodness of a beer that you've ever had, or a fizzy drink, like all the time. Like it was brutal work, and it was frustrating, and at the same time, like you're just learning, you're imbibing these concepts. And one of my besties in grad school, his professor had won the Nobel Prize for discovery of nitrous oxide, the Viagra.
Wow.
Yeah. And
Wow.
so we had other had other sort of really brilliant people at the time. And that was when Baylor College of Medicine, so MD Anderson is co-located with Baylor College of Medicine, and so at that time they were wrapping up the Human Genome Project, and and trying to figure out what it meant. And so it was just a wild, great time to be there, and just met brilliant people at all levels. But ultimately, it wasn't enough, and I still wanted to be a physician. I kind of realized that for sure, and then I applied and got into med school at that point. So it was
Wow.
a journey, and yet, despite all of that, here I am, having a primary care clinic in Austin, Austin Dripping Springs, which I never would have imagined myself doing.
Yeah. So I was telling him right before we started recording that I actually found you because I was looking for a concierge medicine doctor because I'd had one in Plano, Texas, where I used to live.
Yeah.
And he's the one that finally got me diagnosed with Crohn's and colitis. And I had like been to the doctor for like 3 years trying to figure out what the heck was wrong with me. And
Yeah.
I mean, it was just so much pain and I just couldn't figure it out. And anyway, it ended up getting colitis Crohn's disease as the real diagnosis. But when we got down to the real problem, but anyhow, my whole point is when I was looking for you, I found your YouTube channel. Do you still have a YouTube channel?
I do. I have just recently started putting more stuff on there.
Fun.
Believe it or not, I hate the camera. I do.
I
Um,
do too. I do too.
I'm
And here,
old enough to, I'm the pre-internet era guy.
yeah,
I'm sure my kids look at me like, who are you sometimes? But so for me, like the idea of, in the Marine Corps, it's not about you, it's about the team, it's about helping others. And that, or I've imbibed that, right? Because I have a pretty big ego, I'm not going to lie. But to sit there and proclaim that I am the knowledge bringer of whatever, it takes a lot of chutzpah that,
yeah.
I've learned to get over. And so I do have a lot of value. And having the clinic is really sort of, oh, yeah, I do know what I'm talking about. Oh, yeah. This is, people really do need to hear that. And I do have a vision for the clinic and where it goes from here down the road. But so, yeah, I've actually started recording, and there's all these, as you know well, right? You always have an excuse not to start. There's always some, oh, well, I'll do it tomorrow. Oh, well, I'm really busy right now. And then I just have friends who keep poking, and they're like, so when are you going to do it? When are you going to do it? When are you going to do it? I'm like,
That's awesome.
oh,
That's awesome. Good friends. We all need good friends to keep pushing us too. So,
uh-huh.
well, okay. So tell us how you were emergency medicine doctor, right? And that's when I found you on YouTube because that was what you were doing, or at least you were
Yeah,
still working in emergency medicine because I
yeah.
remember you being outside the hospital, like on your break, recording your YouTube,
Oh, that
which
one.
was so cool. Which was so cool. But so, how did that evolve? Like, what made you go, okay, I'm leaving this and I'm going to start this concierge medicine concept?
Yeah, that's a great question, Joan. If I had to say one thing that really kind of got me going was, so I got into med school, and my story is that I was going to be a neurosurgeon up until literally the last little bit of med school because it was intense, it was high stakes, high wire. I had really good judgment, really good manual dexterity, and I've been shadowing a lot with the neurosurgery staff there at UT Houston, or sorry, UT San Antonio. And so, but I realized that these people, like, they did one thing and one thing only, and their lives in residency, and I heard afterwards, were pretty miserable. I was like, ooh, I don't want that. And I was interested in so many things. So I did a rotation at the very beginning of my fourth year, and that's about the time that you, as a medical student, you have to decide. Or if you haven't already decided, you've got to decide probably by September, October of your fourth year. Otherwise, you've missed the boat. And I went
Right.
and did a rotation in emergency medicine at University of Cincinnati, and I fell in love. It was like it was chaos. There was people insanity. There was people crazy, people cussing, people in real distress.
It was like the Marine Corps. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. It was wild. And
A little bit.
to be fair, I was not a combat arms military guy in the Marine Corps, so I don't want to claim that. But it was wild, and I felt, I'm at home, and so I really got into it, and it was like being the guy who helps you. I'm that guy, right? And that being an ER doctor, a lot of us love to solve problems, right? We like to be the hero because an ER doctor, there's always those TV shows, right? And they sometimes talk about the surgeons like Grey's Anatomy, which I despise, but anyway. But a lot of the TV shows talk about ER doctors as saving someone's life. And yeah, that's why a lot of us go into it because we want to be that hero. And then you get into it and you grind down, and what you see is people that are just at their wits' end, and so many problems that could have been solved had someone else been paying attention. And I would send somebody home from the ER saying, follow up with your doctor. And in my head, I know you're not going to follow up. You have no one, and you have no way to access care. And we talk about these systems of care, and there is no system of care in the United States. There just isn't, right? And so
Yeah.
the ER ends up being like, I call it as a famous ER doctor, Billy Mallon, said once, we're like, the ER is like the newspaper at the bottom of a birdcage. We catch all the crap from the rest of the system. We have to deal with it, right? And it gets really wears you down. And so as right about the time the pandemic was hitting, I was just really kind of burned out because you don't have any continuity with patients. You really have really great connections with people. They're asking you to be their doctor. You're like, that's not me. I don't do that. Right. But I'd really like to help you. And COVID hit and it was real. Like later versions were not as bad, but that first version was horrible. And I just kind of had a come to Jesus moment. Like, what do I want to do? Am I going to be patching, putting patches on the ship as it goes down? Or am
Mm,
I going to
wow.
try and like get out of that negative cycle of just dealing with the horrible outcomes? Or can I make a positive impact down the road? Right. And so one of my friends, he's a ER guy who'd started a concierge practice. He's like, you should really come see my clinic and when you have a day off and come see what I do. And this is a guy who's ER trained just like me. And yet he had this clinic and he thought about long term. He had these long conversations with people. As you might have guessed, I like to talk. And you could sit there and have a 30-minute conversation with someone and listen to them and learn about what's really motivating them. And I've always been a student of human psychology, what motivates people to actually do something. Um, and it's like, maybe I can do this. So yeah, I decided, well, I'm going to end up a crispy critter mentally if I don't try. And
Yeah.
as you get older, it's harder to try, right? It's harder to
Amen.
take leaps. And so I was in my 40s and I'm like, oh, whatever, this is a good time. If I fail, I fail. It's not a big deal. And so I opened up the clinic and got my legs under me and took off. So
Yes. And you're doing so much more now. But I want to say out loud to everyone, I feel like the two concierge medicine doctors I've had, Dr. Scott Yates in Dallas, who was the first one I ever heard of doing this kind of program, where you pay when we'll explain that, but you pay a monthly fee to be a part of the practice. And
yeah,
then now you guys are the only doctors that ever spent any significant amount of time with me as a patient, especially on intake, right? When you're first there.
yeah,
And being that my background a long time ago was physical therapy, and I used to work in rehab and wound care and all that jazz. I found that so valuable because I felt like as a physical therapist, I often would hear the things that the doctor never heard and maybe even see things that sometimes the doctor didn't hear because they were just too quick. It was just too quick
yeah,
a visit.
that's right.
So I loved that first session. And I mean, I don't know what you do now, but I swear it was like an hour and a half or something you spent with me just and not just learning about my health, but learning about my life and how I live. And it was just really, it's just so great to have a physician hear the whole package and not, not do the drive-by thing. So yay for that. So tell me about that. Like, was that the model that your friend already had kind of set up?
Yeah.
And did you know how many patients you needed or how you were going to survive in that environment? Or how'd you set it
Yeah.
all up? How'd you
So
even
great
know to
question.
set it all up?
So there's a great community of physicians out there. I'm an outgrowth of what's called the direct primary care movement, DPC, and that idea is that there's not a third party, an insurance company or a practice manager or some other person telling you, like getting in between the doctor and the patient. That you and the doctor can sit there and have the conversation and decide together what you want to do. Okay. And I want to. So this was started probably about 15 years ago, and I remember reading a book by this guy Douglas Farrago. He's actually his clinic. He's not retired, but look, when I found his information, he was in a clinic 30 minutes from UVA, or 30 or 45 minutes, right? Like that's where he founded his practice, and he talked about having like he did it in a sort of older office building, and they had a couch and a comfy couch and lights, and people would come in and relax, and then they'd see him. And I was reading this book, I was like, oh my god! And there's a Facebook group that's for physicians, so I joined that group, and I started asking the same newbie questions that they all ask. And through that, I met my friend Mike Garrett, and Mike was like, hey, we're in Austin, we're close, come visit, come check it out. And so I started to do that. And so yeah, there's a lot of doubt and a lot of fear. And as you know, Joan, doing small business, there's a lot of the detail that comes with establishing business that's not fun. We all want to do the fun thing. And the fun thing,
Yes.
yeah,
The fun thing is so fun.
it's so fun. The other stuff is not fun, right?
Yes. Totally
And
unfun.
so, yeah, and so I'm sitting here thinking, well, here I am, a well-established ER doctor now, trying to start this business. I don't know all this, like, but I always know that the first, it takes 10,000 hours or so to become a master at something. And so I said, just put your foot down, one patient at a time. And I sort of evolved my practice because there's the saying in that community is if you met one direct primary care clinic, you've met one direct primary care clinic. In other words, everyone does it a little differently, and that's innovation.
Yes.
Someone's always innovating. So to answer your question, that's how I started. And yes, at that time I was working full time in the ER. So I would see my patients. I'd be open like 2 days a week, and then I'd be in the ER the rest of the time, or taking care of my kids. And yeah, I just had as I started to accumulate patients, I could drop down my ER time. And now I only do ER once in a while. That's more mostly to keep my skills up so I can keep my board certification. But I really don't do it full time anymore, and I don't miss it, which is kind of a shocking realization for me.
That's an awesome thing though. How amazing.
Yeah.
So the Facebook groups, your friend Mike helping you out, and then did you go hire people? I mean, how did you navigate all the other little things? Like I think
No.
about like just insurance just makes my head explode. So I mean for
But
myself, let alone having a practice and everything. And I
yeah.
know you kind of cut some of that out. So can you explain how the insurance works in the concierge medicine?
Yeah, and so if any of my they call it fee for service. If any of my fee for service colleagues see this, they're probably I want to let them know that they're trapped in a system that is not designed for them. So the thing that any of your listeners or watchers who are paying attention to this podcast need to know is that the physicians are not in control of medicine in most places. They're just not. They're a highly paid data entry clerk who has some medical skills that everyone uses their license to enrich themselves. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's real. Okay. For example, one of my friends, he's an ER physician, a good friend of mine. We met actually at our first job as an ER attendings. He his wife cut open her hand. He brought her in, checked her in, did the stitches, whatever, and he got a bill for his services for something like $6,000. Like the ER, the group charged him our group charged him $6,000 for a 30-minute procedure, and he at the time we were both getting paid about $145 an hour.
Wow.
Where is that money coming from? Where is it going? Right. And then insurance companies. So the thing about it, so think about the fee for service colleagues is that they, in order to, so if you have a typical clinic that is anywhere in the US that's not run by one doctor, if they take insurance, they need at a minimum a biller, someone to code and bill their charts. They need someone to be an office manager or practice manager that makes sure all the admin stuff goes. And the doctor, in order to make overhead, needs to see 20 to 30 patients a day. 20 to 30 just to make ends meet. Maybe 20 if they just are trying to cover costs, and then anything above 20 that's towards your salary, right?
Wow.
And so
That's a lot
it
of
gets
patients.
crazy, right? And they're just stuck in this thing. And so, there are non-compete agreements which are now going out of favor, but they would lure doctors, primary care doctors to these sites and say, oh, it's going to be fine. Oh, but we're going to add on all this administrative stuff. You have all the stuff that you need to get a doctor. Why didn't you respond to that patient's email in 24 hours? But we saw 30 patients, but you also had to attend this meeting, but you also had to do compliance. It's insane, right? And so just so I don't know if you know this, Joan, you probably do, but a good, like a full panel for primary care doctors starts at about 2 to 3,000 patients. They have two to three
Wow.
thousand patients that are theirs, but they only see so many, and each visit they get paid. Whereas you and I, the way it works is here's a monthly fee. That's it. You can see me every day for a month if you need to. We talk about it like why are we here every day, but that's fine, right? And I'm there for you when you need me. I'm not. Oh, I'm booked out for 2 weeks, right? And
Right.
so it's a different
It's
dynamic.
amazing. It's an amazing model. Can I just say it's so cool to text your doctor about something that's happening and him say, "Oh, come in," or "Oh, I'll call you in something." It's like amazing. It's amazing. It
Is
makes you
it?
feel
I mean,
like
because I'm
you're
not
a
used to it, right?
billionaire. Yeah. I like love it. It's my favorite thing ever because
Okay.
who has time? I don't have time. And yeah, it's such a pain. Everything's such a pain. Whereas I know when I come into you, I'm going to get right in. It's not like I'm going
Yeah.
to wait for an hour till I get to see you, which is typically, I mean, it's somewhere between 30 minutes and an hour if you sit in a
Yeah.
doctor's office. And I've been behind the scenes. I've been in the wound care clinic where the doctor sometimes is messing around. It's not like he's seeing a patient, he's just messing around. And we have 5 patients waiting on us. And I'm like freaking out because I know we have to do all this wound care. You know what I'm saying? So it depends on the place, but I'm just saying, like, yeah. So sometimes those hours are because they're seeing so many patients, and sometimes it's just because they needed a break for a second and, we're goofing off, but I always hated that. I'm like, just tell me to come an hour later. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So I
I mean,
love that. I mean, there's
I've
so
been in a
many good
position.
things, so
Yeah.
many good things that you're doing.
Well, yeah, and yeah, thanks, and I tried, but sometimes I've had to have people in our clinic wait 5 minutes, and I feel so terrible. I'm like, I'm just wrapping
Oh,
up
well,
with
you
something.
need to stop that. You need to stop that right now because you do not need to feel bad about 5 minutes. Well, so
Yeah.
okay, so you're paying a monthly fee. I mean, that's what
Uh,
I do. That's what Jeff, my husband, does. And that gets you access to you. What does that cover for people that see you? Like tell people what that covers.
yeah, so it just depends on what you need, right? So for all my patients, I'm, your generalist primary care doctor. I don't see kids anymore. I just realized there's some great pediatricians in the area, and I realize that's a skill set I probably won't have the time to master. So I'll be your urgent care sort of doctor for your little ones, but I prefer that they see a pediatrician. So for anybody who's really 15 and up or 13 and up, I'm your doc, and I do anything a primary care doctor could or should do, including, have any respiratory illnesses, screening exams. I don't feel well. Can I see you today? And then I do stuff that a lot of primary care doctors either don't or can't do or don't have the time or the skills to do. So a big part of the practice is ultrasound. I don't think I've ever done it with you, but
Mm.
we have ultrasound in the clinic, and as an ER doc, I'm trained to do all kinds of ultrasound. So I've used it multiple times to diagnose stuff. I've saved people trips to the ER or the radiology place because, do I have a blood clot? Let's look. Nope, you don't have a blood clot. Have a nice day. I can do it in like 3 minutes and rule it out, right? Saving people lots of money. We do EKGs, we do cardiovascular screening, we do laceration repair. I've drained, I've injected stuff into shoulders for like bursitis. I've drained fluids out if they need to be. I did a spinal tap on one of our patients.
Wow.
Who it wasn't, it was a certain situation. We were trying to rule out elevated pressure inside of his head. And I was like, oh, I can do that in the clinic. And we did it safely, and it went just like that, right? And otherwise, he's going to the hospital to get a spinal tap done, right? And so it's kind of wild what we can do. What else can we do? We do weight loss counseling, we do fitness
I'm gonna
talks.
say, didn't you expand to a whole health and wellness section as well?
Yeah, so we have mental health people. So, so what I find is that medical problems are usually, sometimes it's luck and genetics, sometimes it's bad behavior, and oftentimes there's a mental health component to it, right? So a big part of what I do is saying, hey, look, I can tell that you are not believing that you can be better, or that you feel like it's impossible for you to get healthy. So if you're overweight, if you've been sick or you've been struggling with your health and wellness for a while. And I realized that I am good as a motivator, but I'm not an actual counselor. I don't have those skills. I have some of those skills, but not all of them. And I'm not trained for that. So I have a whole mental health team that does things. My partner, Dr. Patrick, now he does ketamine infusions. We're going to start ketamine infusions for people with PTSD, for depression, severe anxiety, traumatic brain injury. For the people with TBI, will often get PTSD and other sort of anxiety disorders as a result of that. For men's health, I do low testosterone. I try to figure out why men have low T. I expanded into women's hormone therapy because you ladies keep asking me for it, and I'm like, okay, fine. Might as well learn about it, right? And
Yeah.
because I don't want you to go to another doctor if I can do it well, right? And so those are just some of the things that we do. I'm trying to think what else we do. Yeah, we do EKGs. If I think that you need to go see the cardiologist, I'll pick up the phone and you'll be in the cardiologist that afternoon. Am I, right there in Dripping Springs. It's kind of, that's kind of what we do. But all the standard stuff. And then I try to look towards you. Where are you going to be in 3 months? And I try to, I don't know, vision quest or get you to get my patients to think, yeah, but who do you want to be? Right? Because if you're in a regular doctor's office, I, as a doctor, don't have time to try and motivate you to be better. I'm just trying to deal with your problems. Now, that's not always true, and there's some fantastic doctors locally who do it despite the challenges, right? But my thing is like, I'm always looking at best in people. Like, what do you want to be? What do you really want? I'm always asking people, but what do you really want? Not what you're supposed to say, but what do you really want? Because I've been asking that question of people for 30 years. And it turns out that when you actually can tease out what people actually want and that you can align their goals towards that, like boom, people take off, right?
Hey, just a quick word about Dream Catalyst Life and Business Coaching, where it is our dream to help you live yours. How do we do that? Through group coaching, one-on-one coaching, workshops, or even something like a 90-day blitz, which we're getting ready to launch for fall. I'm super excited. Check us out at dream-catalyst.com. If you want to schedule your free consultation, email us at info@dreamcatalyst.com. Dream Catalyst Coaching, because your dreams are waiting for you. Thank you for saying that out loud. You'd be a great coach. You are a coach. I know that. So do you feel like when people come in, and I love that you added the mental health aspect. Mental health is such a huge component. And, I loved that when I sat down with you, because I came to see you knowing I had to have a come to Jesus with my health. And I did the health podcast, which I kind of went through that process of, like I had all these diagnoses that were new. It's like, hey,
Yeah.
here you go for 4 years of not taking care of yourself, Joan. Here's what you get. I remember the cardiologist that I saw actually said, so congratulations, you have 2 new diagnoses. And I was like, I totally laughed. I thought it was hilarious because I'm like, thank you. Yeah, I knew it would be bad. I just didn't know how bad it was going to get. But I remember sitting in your office when you said, my blood sugar was basically, I was diabetic. And I was like, don't even write that cuss word in my chart. Because I saw so many diabetic foot wounds as a wound care therapist.
Yep.
And I saw so many, terrible things happen because of diabetes. I was like, I refuse to be, I don't care what I have to give up or what I have to do. I'm not doing that. And I remember you being like, okay, like finally there's one that's, but in my health podcast, one of the things I'm trying to get across to people, because I think the problem is we think we can't change. We think we can't ever, like the thought of never having cake again for me, because that's my drug of choice in the food. Smorgasbord is cake,
Yeah.
wedding cake specifically, but any kind of cake, really birthday cake. That's my drug. And I mean, thinking, well, what my kids are gonna get married and I'm not gonna have a piece of wedding cake. And now that I'm completely off carbs, which I remember you telling me, Joan, you need to for sure be less than 100 grams of carbs. But if you can, less than 30, it's harder to maintain, but you could do it. Like try it and
Yeah.
try it. And I was so grateful for that, because you were so specific and you were so like, this is what you need to do to get better. And I was
Right.
like, yes, sir. Like I can do that, because that's what I needed. And I hate to say it this way, because Jeff, my husband, delayed coming to see you for a while. And the reason he delayed is because he hates seeing doctors. And you know why he
Yeah.
hates doctors? Because he already has this massive guilt, anxiety, I'm not enough thing that he's carrying around with him. And when a doctor tells him, you're overweight and you need to change your habits, he feels terrible, like terrible.
I have a
And
question for you. Oh, sorry. Go
yes,
ahead.
yeah, no, go ahead, please.
Yeah, but what is one of the things I told you? Do you remember? I also told you I'm not any different than you. I have the
Oh, absolutely.
struggles. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, like because in medicine you're not supposed to talk about yourself, and it's still true to a good point. Like, it's not about you, right? But whenever I see someone that's in that space and saying it's impossible, I'm like, "Pff, anything's possible. But you have to want to change, and sometimes seeing someone that you may or may not respect, but clearly whatever. Um, saying, yeah, it's a struggle. Just get over it. Get over the and I don't want to belittle it by saying crying about it, but that sort of negative emotion, like this sucks. We all go there, but it doesn't help, right? But if you're just like,
Yes.
okay, accept that this is a thing, now what are you gonna do? And guess what? There's a way forward. I think that's the key. If you can get someone to say reorient, and then something I wanted to say, I think aligns with your podcast, which is one of the reasons I'm here today, is there's a really good book. Have you read it? Atomic Habits by James Clear.
I have. It's on my shelf right here in my studio. So
Right. So what's one of the best things about that book, or one of the things that stuck out to me, was that when it comes to motivating people, Joan, and you've seen this in what you do, and I've seen it in what I do, is that negative motivation. If you don't do this, X bad thing will happen. That never lasts, right? Human beings are wired to go towards things that make us feel good. That's why you like wedding cake, because for whatever reason, your brain made that association between wedding cake and it makes me feel good, right? We all have our struggles. And what I tell people is that if you go towards a goal that is a positive goal and you visualize it and you make it real, I think the current term is manifest, make it manifest, right? You manifest the reality. There's a lot of derision about that, but that's actually a real thing, right? Because if you say this is the reality that I want, and you can clearly visualize what that looks like, and you can start to make a plan to get to it, then all of a sudden it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You manifest it because you start putting
Absolutely.
it, right? And
It's
it
all
makes
energy. It's all energy. Your brain,
yes.
your emotions, all of it. You're attracting the right people and all the things. Yes, I
And that's
totally
the
agree.
other thing, right? Like getting the right people around you, right? The people that you spend the time around are going to influence you more than you'd like to think. And so it's really key that you get negative influences out of your life, or at
Well,
least feel good.
I loved that you were in that conversation. You were very real. You were, like you said, you were talking about yourself and your own struggles with all of it and what you'd learned so far for yourself, but also you were very encouraging.
Yeah,
So even though I was facing a diagnosis that I really couldn't stand, like I
right.
really didn't want that diagnosis, but the reality of it was, okay, here's somebody in front of me that wants to partner with me and make sure that I get rid of this diagnosis, right?
Right.
And make sure that we cover all the health issues that might be there, you know, on top of this, which we did. We uncovered several that, thank God, are no more. But I
Yeah.
feel like, who does that? I mean, nobody does that. Feel like as a PT, I would go into a patient's room and do exactly what you said. I would say, I don't care what your medical diagnosis is. I want to know what you want in your life, and let's go create that. I don't care what the doctor says. We're going to go create that together. And that
Yeah.
was my job, you know, but having a doctor be like that is just such an amazing mindset, you know? And I think I remember you were talking about 30 patients a day. So one of my very first physical therapy job,
Yeah.
and it was a very coveted position, blah, blah, blah. So there was a great experienced therapist, there was a PT assistant, and there was a PT tech, and they were hiring another physical therapist. Well, they went through like 80 people or something to interview. And at that time, it was 1997. So some law that George W. Bush had put in place was not giving medical reimbursement like it used to for PT. So all the jobs that, you know, the world said were going to be out there for me were not there. So it took me a minute to get a job. Anyway,
Yeah.
long story short, I interviewed like 2 or 3 times with them. They hired me. I was number one in my class. They hired me. I was evaluating patients because the PT assistant could not do evals, right? So I was evaluating patients so fast that they were getting discharged, and then I would have to sign off on that discharge paperwork, you know, 3 or 4 days later. And I mean, I was seeing so many patients, and I was signing off on these discharges, and I was literally like, I don't even, like, I could see my handwriting in the chart. That was back when it wasn't on computers. I could see
I
that
remember
I
those days.
evaluated them, right? And I was like,
Yeah.
I don't even know who this patient is. Like, and I did it for like 6, 8 months. And I finally, and the other experienced physical therapist was fantastic, but she could not be with me 24/7 to teach me, you know. And if I ran into a problem that I didn't know what to do with, I would have to track her down, which we didn't have cell phones. So I couldn't just call her, text her, to track her down, send her a beeper message and try to get her.
Oh, that's old school. Yeah.
It's crazy. So I remember sitting down with that director, and I was like, I have to give my 2 weeks notice. I didn't even have another job yet, but I was like, I can no longer, I just hit the wall, and I was like, I cannot do this. This is a total like lawsuit waiting to happen, because I
Yep.
don't even know who these patients are. Like, that's how my brain is just so full. I said, you need another 20-year veteran PT in this job. It does not need to be a new grad. But of course, they didn't want to pay for that. Between the negative pressure of having to refer patients, like there was all this pressure to get outpatient referrals from the inpatient patients, and just all of that kind of crud that was happening, I cannot tell you what a relief it was to get out of the entire healthcare crap system.
Yeah.
Do you feel like that? Do you still feel like that? How many years has it been?
Oh, yeah, right. And so, absolutely. And in fact, like hospitals are miserable places, and not just because people are sick, but because there's like a sickness in the way that healthcare is delivered in this country. And it's not going to be fixed by socialized medicine because that has incentive perversion of incentives, right? But you basically hit the problem. You have so many people, and the hospitals just want to make money, right? Whether they're trying to like save themselves, the bottom line, or they're trying to get rich. I mean, you and I have seen examples in our careers of just like outright fraud, waste, and
Oh,
abuse, right?
terrible. Yeah.
And it's never stops, right? But ultimately, medicine is a retail business. It is not a wholesale business. It's not going to be mechanized. It's not going to be, it's telemedicine is the wave of the future. No, it's not, because you're not seeing, smelling, hearing that patient right in front of you. You're seeing what they're going to show you, and you're missing their foot tapping a mile away, or them like squeezing their hands because they're so mad or stressed. Like and ultimately, that's where caring comes, like on that retail level. And so that kind of dovetails nicely. I have, a lot of my patients. I remember one of my this couple, they've been with me almost since the very, very beginning. And I initially took Blue Cross Blue Shield because I listened to someone who said, you'll never make it if you don't at least take one insurance thing. And they were insurance, they were Blue Cross Blue Shield. And I kept saying, look, you really, I hate having to send you a bill for what your insurance doesn't cover. Can we just stop? Can you just join? And they're like, no, we have great insurance, great insurance. And then their son went to New York on their plan, sliced his hand open, and walked around to the different ERs in New York City saying, do you take my insurance? And the second one did. And great. I mean, he had to have surgery that night, but apparently the surgeon didn't take it. And he got a bill for $100,000 that his insurance refused to pay.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, it was like he was just hot. He was just telling me, like, I can't believe this. We pay so much for premiums. And I'm like, sounds terrible. And he's like, that's it, we're joining. And they've been with me since, like, they've been members since then, right? And so it doesn't matter how good your insurance is, you can't get access to people. You can't guarantee that there's someone out there who's gonna be like, no, that doesn't work. Oh, I'm sorry, you're gonna charge you ridiculous amounts of money. And I'm sure that doctor was not being malicious. The surgeon,
No.
I'm sure that's just what the game they have to play to get paid a reasonable amount. And it's because you're playing with someone else's money, and so it doesn't matter, right? If you, Joan, are spending your money or your family's money, you're gonna watch that dollar. You're gonna be like, okay, is that really worth spending that money on, right? But then
Right.
let's say you're spending someone else's money, but like it's family, it still matters. So you're going to be a little bit more careful, but not as careful, right? You're not going to be
Yeah.
as careful as it was like you're coming at your bank account. And then if you're spending someone else's money, whatever, the government's paying for it or the insurance company's paying for it. So whatever. And so, yeah, sorry, don't mean to go on a
That's
rant.
that's awesome. So insurance, let's talk about that. So you don't take insurance. I know you negotiate cash prices for a lot of things. Is that how you get around that, or do people just self-file, or how do you handle
And
that?
I do not take any insurance. And I can tell you that people have tried to do like super bill, but I don't do that. I don't do it. So caveat, I do still see Medicare patients because there's a handful of patients that I only got into taking Medicare patients because a good friend of mine was really sick and he was elderly. And I'm like, okay, fine, I'll get credentialed so I can be your doctor. And he was my patient for 2.5 years. So he passed. And along the way, I've accumulated some other Medicare patients, and they've been really great people. And so I'm still opted into Medicare, and I bill them, right? But whatever Medicare says I get, that's just what I get, right? But for everyone else, it is strictly just you pay the monthly fee, that's it. Now, if you're doing something special, like I'm going to do a special procedure or whatever, then especially if there's a material cost to it, um, you're going to pay a fee, but it's going to be way cheaper than you'd ever get it anywhere else, right? And then, for example, like labs, yes, I negotiate prices on labs. So I'm always calling around to like different lab companies and saying, where's the cheapest? So a lot of people in Central Texas use CPL labs. And if you're using your insurance, it can still bite you in the booty. But, it is what it is. I want it to be convenient for people. But in our clinic, we offer all the labs, almost all the labs you can get at CPL, except some very specialized ones. And like for our standard new patient panel, which is like CBC, comprehensive metabolic panel, it's your hormone levels, whether you're male or female. It's like your insulin levels, your A1C, looking at iron deficiency or overload. We're looking at advanced cardiovascular testing. It's a whole raft of things, vitamin D levels, vitamin B12s, $112 cash or $199 cash, like
Yes.
cash. And the big scam is that these labs like CPL that charge you hundreds or thousands of dollars for labs that they themselves are, they would charge me 250 for
Right.
$2.50.
That's so crazy.
It's
That's
so
so
crazy.
crazy. Okay,
But
but the beautiful thing about you not doing any of the insurance stuff is you're not beholden to the insurance companies, right? Because we talked about that. Like
yeah,
you've been dogged by insurance companies for not prescribing a certain medicine because it's protocol or whatever, right? Is that right?
yeah. So great question. So
Telling on you?
Uh, well, so there are like so there are these sort of guidelines that say you should be doing it, and as a physician, you're always having to balance between what's the standard of care, if there is such a standard, versus yeah, that's not the right choice in this patient, right? And so, for example, did you know, Joan? I was speaking with a really wonderful cardiologist recently, and I didn't know this, and I've been doing this for years. Did you know that statin use actually increases plaque buildup in the heart?
I actually did know that.
You
I
did,
did know
okay.
that, but I have dove into the healthcare
Yeah,
everything
well, most
to
of
figure
us
my own stuff
don't,
out.
right? And so, yeah, I was having a
A lot
conversation with
of
a
bad
cardiologist.
side effects with statins too,
Yeah, well, so in
right?
the right patient population, it still makes sense, right? But what people don't know is that statins were initially FDA approved for a very small subset of patients with severe uncontrolled diabetes, severe chronic kidney disease, people with heart failure or acute coronary syndrome, coronary artery disease, plaque buildup. They were just sick people. For those people, it was good, and the outcomes used to promulgate or to get the approval was like, their mortality at 90 days and at 180 days was improved by using a statin, right? But long-term use of statins, it's more controversial. And the cardiologist, who's young and smart and great dude, was like, yeah, I always have this conundrum because if someone has plaque buildup, I know that they're going to get more plaque because that's what the statin does. It accelerates that, right? But it does. They do reduce the incidence of stroke and heart attack, and so you just have to. It's a damn like the skill and charybdis. You're kind of damned if you do and you damned if you don't, right? So when it comes turning it back to the drug thing, you and I or whoever is in front of me, we have a conversation. What do you want to do? Here's my advice, and that's the other thing. I'm not your daddy,
I
right? There's a very
love that. I love that
pluralistic.
about you. You don't just like dictate, you work. It's like a partnership. It's like a real, doctor who is also coaching you back to health. So I love that. That's so
Well,
amazing.
we talk about autonomy all the time, right? Your body, your choice. And depending on, but that's been the theme, right? And that's actually something they go over a lot in medicine is autonomy. But in practice, physicians are very, it's my way or the highway. They get very upset. And I was that way too as a young doctor, like newly graduated. Like, well, I know the science. You know nothing, you silly human. Serious, like that is, it's not spoken of, and yet like it's in the water, it's in the air. It just becomes this like and so this doctors are like God complexes. A lot of that's where it comes from, right? And what if you're a smart and humble doctor, or if you're a smart doctor, you will get humbled because your assumptions are just that they're assumptions, and patients will often have data or they won't conform to what it's supposed to be, and oops, right? And I try to reduce the oops because as a research scientist, my approach has always been you don't know what you don't know. Those unknown or the unknowns can bite you in the ass and harm your patient, right? And whatever your definition of the truth is, the reality is always going to be different or a lot more complex than you thought it was every time, whether you're talking about medicine, science, political systems, you name it. Like there's always the third and fourth order consequences that nobody thinks about.
Right, right. Well, I have to say, I think that's my favorite thing about working with you and also for my husband, because he comes away from meeting with you not feeling bad. Now, I'm
Really?
not saying he's in perfect health, but you've never made him feel bad. You've been direct and you've been honest, but you've had the conversation with him like, here's the situation. What are you
Yeah.
going to do about it? What's the best plan for you? And giving him suggestions. I also love that you do this whole like amazing summary of recommendations and kind of how to move forward. Like here's what your results say. So not only do you tell me, but then you do it in an email where it's like information. Cause I mean, this is so dumb, but this is a big deal for me as a coach too. Like that's how I coach. I coach them and then I send them, here's a summary of what we talked about. Because
Okay.
the problem is you're only going to catch so much in person. And being the one in my family who was the medical person and having to take my mom through lung cancer and all that ensued, which was terrible. But like, people don't retain what, especially if you don't have all the medical lingo, they don't retain what the doctor says. So it's such a beautiful thing that you do this beautiful summary, and here's the action steps you're going to take. Like, here's the action plan, right? Um,
Yeah.
and you do that all the time. I just love that. That is so helpful. You don't know how helpful that is, because no other
I don't
doctor
ever
does
get the
that.
feedback. This is great because it's a lot of work on my part, right? And sometimes I wonder, is it even worth it? I rarely hear the, oh, that was great. People are like, okay, all right, great, thanks. And I'm like,
You can send out an anonymous survey so that they can honestly give you feedback and not feel like they're giving you bad news or something.
but
Anyway,
like
okay.
thankfully AI has
Yeah.
gotten a lot. Yeah, no, like that's kind of been now that I've gotten AI to sort of help generate this stuff. Like I have this AI scribe now that doesn't capture your actual like health informatics data, but it just listens, and I can call you Joan the Wonderful, Joan the Wise, and whatever. It's not going to know who it is, but it can listen, and I tell it this is how I want you to structure my notes, and this is how I want you to structure my discharge instructions or my follow-up summaries, and it'll do it, and I just have to make edits, and it captures over time. It captures my voice better and better, and so it definitely saves me a ton of time, and it still comes out. But yeah, like the labs that I do, it's a huge pain in the ass. But I feel like I would want that, and that one I get a lot of feedback on. So
Yeah. Yeah.
you know,
Well, all of it is so helpful. Well, so let's talk about this whole. So, how long have you been in practice now at Code One?
so we'll hit 5 years in February.
Come on. It's been 5 years already. Man, COVID just stole time from us, didn't
It
it?
sure
Because
did,
it
didn't
was
it?
for like 5 years. Okay, well, 5 years. So if somebody is out there and they're thinking about getting into medicine, let's just say that's their dream. Like, my son is torn between musical theater, he wants to be in Broadway, or neurosurgeon. And I'm like, those are so far apart. But everybody in the health field is now telling him, don't go get a degree in biology. They're sick of that. Go get your degree BFA in theater, and then do your prereqs and do a really good MCAT.
It's right. It's exactly right.
Anyway, so he's doing the internship through the high school where he goes around, and he's very much enjoying that. But he's also doing his musical theater career. So if they're thinking about going into it, or if they're in it and they're already seeing all the signs that you saw, or feeling just down about not being able to take care of patients the right way or as well as they want to, what suggestions do you have for people either going into the field, or they're in the field and they're like, and I mean, it may not be doctors, it might be nurse practitioners, it could be anybody, right?
Yeah.
What would you say to them?
First of all, if you're a nerd, that's great. All doctors are nerds, by the way. All doctors are nerds. I went over to my buddy's house this past Friday, and he's got Warhammer and all this awesome D&D stuff. And I was like, a fellow nerd. And then we geeked out about science fiction books that we both knew. I didn't know that about him. And so all of us are nerds. Every single doctor is a nerd. Even that orthopedic surgeon with the Chad jaw and the blue eyes, and everyone's like, "Oh, he's so pretty." He's a nerd too. All of them are nerds, right? They just hide it better than most of us. In fact, doctors are really good at hiding their nerdship. So the BFA, musical theater, go for it. That's fine, and take the prereqs. If you're already in it, I'm just going to say this: you just have to make it through 4 years of medical school, and you have to make it through X number of years of residency, and then you can design your practice. You don't have to get involved in corporate medicine. Don't take loans. Take the fewest loans you can, because when you have freedom of movement financially, you can do what you want, right? And so if you're like, what I would say is 4 years of residency or of medical school. If you're doing family practice or internal medicine, do 3 years of that. And then, because you're not quite at your peak state, take another 1 or 2 years to really hone your skills. You knew this. You did physical therapy school, and yet when you got to the real world, it's like, oh my God, right? And it takes about 2 or 3 years to really,
So scary.
yeah,
So
but that's when you hit mastery level. You start to go, yeah, I got this, right? Okay. And at that point, I'm talking, that's like 8 to 10 years, right? Or 9 years. But now you're looking at, okay, what do I do with myself? Now you do direct primary care. There are some doctors who do their residency in family medicine that are going right into direct primary care. They don't even bother with the system. And that's another alternative. If you're doing physical therapy, who says that you have to go work for a big hospital unless you want to do like, get a specialty, right? Like pelvic floor, you want to do neuro rehab, that kind of stuff. That's great, right? Because you're not going to get that in the community. You need to go to a concentrated place, right? But if your vision for yourself is, and that's again, we're going back to dream casting, right? To dream catalyst, right? If you want to have a certain, if you have a vision, and it has to be a vision that matters to you, not anybody else, not mom and dad, not your friends, not your loved ones, because ultimately you have to live inside your own head. If you loathe what you're trying to do, you're going to fail, okay? Or you're not going to be as good, or you're not going to serve your patients as well, right? So once you've done all that, once you've decided who you want to be and how you want to practice, right, then align your goals. Direct primary care, open up your own physical therapy clinic, offer multi modalities, right? Do you do trigger point injections? Do you team up with an acupuncturist because those work really well in the right circumstances, right? So it just really depends on how you want to, like, have a vision for how you want your practice. Is what I'll say. Keep your freak flag flying. If you are a nerd and you love singing and musical theater, do it. By the way, I didn't never tell you, but I used to sing in
Out
high
to
school.
Dylan.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I used to sing in high school, and I did musical theater in high school. No
Come
one, first time
on.
I've ever
That's so
publicly
awesome.
revealed that. And then my voice cracked my sophomore year, and it was never the same. But there it is, right? Because that is, you got to keep what makes you alive. Because this job in medicine and healthcare will eat you alive. It will. You've got to have something to give to yourself and to give to your family.
I totally agree. And I feel like so many people in the healthcare field, I mean, they got into it to help people. And then when you're out there in the real world doing your job, you're realizing that you're not helping very much, or you're not helping to the capacity that you could. And so
Yeah.
that's the hardest part about it all, is trying to figure out where you can help more. So I love that. I love that advice. Well, so who along the way has been your, like, I don't, not your spirit animal, but your your encourager, your kids or friends, or who's the one that like helped this dream happen?
So I, you talk about God this podcast, right?
Absolutely. All the time.
I'm not the best Christian in the world. I'm going to admit that. And when I was younger, I definitely doubted him. And do I follow his preachings all the time? No. But I've known since I was a young guy that every time I moved towards healthcare and helping people, things got a lot easier. Anytime I moved away from that, random obstacles would just pop up. And so I felt like there's always been some sort of universal plan, whomever that is driving that. Okay. So when I ask the universe for what should I do, the answer comes back prayer, whatever, whichever, how I'm doing it, it comes back like you love to help people. You love to help people and solve their problems. So anything in that's going to be right. So faith in that has been faith in, I telling God I'm not perfect and I am, I don't try to be perfect and I don't know what to do. So please help. Right. So that's one. And then just I have this brutal desire to never give up. I grew up kind of in foster care for years. It was a really tough childhood, the usual sob story. And from that, I've learned that you absolutely, if the second you give up on yourself, that's it. The world will run over you, right? So that's internal drive. And then now that I have kids, and now that I 5 years ago got primary custody of my boys, it was like I have to build a life that so I'm here for them, right? That being an ER doctor, you work overnight, you might work 24 hours, you might work a bunch of night shifts in a row, and you're always missing your kids. And if mom's not around, how are you going to take care of your kids? Like
Right.
some
That's
babysitter,
good.
some nanny? No. So I like my kids. I like being around them, right? So that was the motivator to do this. And then my friend Mike Garrett is a physician here in the Austin area. He was the one who's like, dude, you can do this. And then we're still really close to this day. We go on these hikes. And I mean, honestly, we could walk and hike for 3 or 4 hours, which we've done from time to time. And we talk the whole time. Oh, did you think of this? Like, it's one of those people that makes things like, as you have an idea, you flesh it out, he adds something positive, and you're like, oh, but now it's even better. And he vice versa. And it's one of those really good relationships. So that's been good. That direct primary care community has been really helpful on Facebook. Um, there's a lot of people out there who need help, who are scared, and just saying that's it. And then you guys, patients, right? I get feedback from you. Sometimes negative feedback that's deserved because no one's perfect. They're like, this could have been better. But usually it's like, man, you changed my life. I've had several patients where they came to me a blob, sort of blobby, right? Pre-diabetic, overweight, high
Talk
blood
about
pressure.
me. Don't
No,
you
no, 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 no. I
just
don't mean
kidding.
that way.
Because
But
I'm
that's what
pretty
that.
blobby when I came to you.
Yeah, that's you
I
tell.
was
I'm not saying anything, right? But that's how
blobby
they would
mentally
describe.
and physically. I'm just saying I was a big, yeah.
Well, that's how
Oh,
they would describe themselves, right? I hear that a lot. I feel like a big blob. I mean, if I had, like, there it is again, right? And so I take people, I help motivate, coach people from here to there, and I see them living their best life now, right? Lots of examples. One guy, he went from blobby, as he would have called it, to, climbing Mount Rainier, like going on like a year later, he's like climbing mountains, right? It's like, and he says, and I have to accept him for his word. He says, if it wasn't for you and this trainer that you connected me with, I wouldn't be here doing this right now, right? So that means a lot to me, right? So that's kind of what keeps me going.
that's awesome. That's awesome. And I love surrounding yourself with people. Well, were there naysayers? Did you have, I mean, I know you had a ton of obstacles because just setting up a business, small business is ridiculously hard. It's just hard.
Yeah.
Everything about it's hard. But like, were there naysayers or were there people that were like, oh, that's never going to work or not really?
My family, they were the biggest
Oh,
ones. They're like, what are you doing? You're an
no,
ER doctor. You make really good money.
would you? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Not like, so, my kids were like, whatever you want, Dad, that's cool. Um, but like my own family were just like, what are you doing? Like, why would you give up being a high-powered ER doctor making oodles of money for this? I'm like, because I get my soul back, right?
yeah.
Uh, and then
And my life back and my life and my time back. Yeah.
right, and sleep and everything. That would be the biggest ones, right? And then other physicians who don't quite understand it. So I'm unique in that, I'm board certified in emergency medicine, but I'm practicing general medicine. I can't claim family medicine or internal medicine, and nor would I, right? But a lot of other physicians like, well, don't you need to go back to residency for that? I'm like, I'm a physician, and no offense, I see a lot of nurse practitioners with a lot less training and skill hanging out their shingle, taking care of people as a primary doctor. I'm sure I can figure it out, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I keep it humble, yeah. So, but a lot of other physicians have been negative, at least in the beginning, not so much anymore. And now I more often than not get a phone call from them like, hey, tell me how you did what you do because I'm really hating my life right now. Can you help?
Yeah. Coach me, give me some hope. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, that's good. That's good. I love turning naysayers. I'm kind of like you. I'm pretty stubborn on whenever I decide I'm going to do something, then, like just tell me I can't because I'll prove you wrong. Just because I want to prove you
Yeah,
wrong.
please tell
And
me
it
I
just
can't do
spurs
it.
me.
I
Yes.
need that. Yes.
My son is the same way. Casey, when he plays basketball, he's like, I love it when they jaw at me. If they don't jaw at me, I don't play very well. But if they jaw at me, I could just three-pointer, three-pointer. I'm like, I don't know why, but sometimes we have to have that push. So, okay, well, I'm going to end all this beautifulness because I know you have patients to see soon. So, I always do like a quick 5 questions. Just
Okay.
what book, other than the Bible, has been the most helpful for you or is the most helpful right now? Because if you're like me, you read all the time. So,
So right
anyone
now,
lately?
currently, Atomic Habits we already talked about, because that's human psychology. There's a great book I just read called AI Driven Leadership, and it's helping me get past blockages. Like, I don't know how to do this, or I don't know how to approach this. And it's by Jeff Green, I think. Jeff. Anyway, AI Driven Leadership, look it up. Great book. I think everyone should. And it doesn't mean that AI is replacing us. So that's one. Was there another book that was 5 books? Or is it?
No, just one, just
Oh,
whatever's
yeah.
been
Okay.
most
So
helpful
those
for you
two, I gave you
lately.
two. I gave you
AI
two.
driven leadership. I will totally read it because I'm an avid reader. I love it. That's why I asked that question. I'm like, what other books do I need to read? All right. Well,
Very well.
what is one dream that you still haven't fulfilled or it's still on your bucket list?
So I want to turn Code One into a multi-site, like all around Texas, practice where it's not only a comfy, cozy, healthy, positive home for patients, but it is a cozy, comfy, positive place where physicians can come and heal themselves, right? They can
That's awesome.
become practice the way they want to practice and serve their patients and not give up their soul.
Oh,
'Cause,
that's amazing.
yeah,
Yay. I'm going to be praying about that for you because that's a great bucket list item because that helps everybody. That
yeah,
helps everyone. So, All right. What is the most amazing place that you've ever traveled, or where's a place you really want to travel? Do you
So,
travel?
oh, I've traveled a lot. I'm trying to think. There's been so many good ones.
I mean, you were in the
In
Marines. I
terms
know.
of sheer beauty, oh man, sheer beauty would have to be God, either Key West, Florida, like not the island, but around the waters around it.
Yeah.
Because I remember driving down from Austin to do some reserve work in the Marine Corps at college, and there's a little Highway 1 that goes down all the way from Miami, and the water was this greenish blue out into the horizon, and there were like fingers of light. It was like God was like shining light down. It was just sparkling and gorgeous. There was that. And Okinawa, Japan. I love Okinawa, Japan. I spent 2 years there, and I could have seen myself, getting out of the Marine Corps and staying in Okinawa if they would have had the gaijin there. It's just a great place.
Very good. Well, that's another place I haven't been. Okay. And then what's your fun little hidden talent or superpower that nobody knows about?
Uh,
You have one?
yeah, I have several. I don't know. I can usually solve any problem. Like any problem, any technical problem, I can usually figure out a solution. It doesn't matter how complex. Or I can write a story. I can make up stories on the fly, usually for my kids, and come up with a theme and a story and start crafting characters. I have a very active imagination. And so, although it hasn't happened much in the last year or two, I have used to write stories for my kids. I've written half written manuscripts on my computer that someday I'll publish. So
That's awesome. Oh, I love that. That so sounds like me too. We're very similar because I took a parageography class, which sounds crazy. Parageography class in college to check off one of the things from my biology degree. I
yeah,
forget what it was in, but fine arts, something. And it was all about creating your own fantasy world. And so it took you the whole semester, and then at the end you had this big project you turned in, and it was your world.
that's cool.
It was so cool. And this is
That's
okay, Dr. Cashio, this is aging me, but I had a word processor. And so it was on my word processor, which had like no memory, right? Because my parents were like, "Do you want a computer or word processor?" I was like, "What would I want a computer for?" So I got a word processor, a brother word processor. Anyway, so it was on my word processor, and I like did all the things to make my world real. Like I had amulets, and I had, maps that were all aged and, burn edges and all the things. Anyway, it was very
that's
interesting.
great.
And so I had this whole satchel. I turned in a satchel as my final project. And my UT professor gave me an A+. He was like, "This is one of the best ones." I was like, "I'm totally going to take this world and create, some fantasy novels at some point." Like that's I would love to do that. That's kind of what I loved as a kid to read. And so anyway, do you know that professor never gave me my satchel back? And I went back like for 5 months or something afterwards and tried to get a hold of him. I mean, emailed him. I did all the things, right? Called and left messages.
He's like, I'm never giving this back to Joan, and now
I keep waiting for a book series to come out with this world, and I've never seen it. But I'm like, "Dadgum, and I wish I
that was
had it."
UT, right?
So glad, yeah. And I'm so glad you have yours saved because now you can go create those. That's amazing.
Well, I mean, listen, to go back to your point about your kiddo who's like, what should I do? Had I known then what I know now, or even years ago, I would have gone full liberal arts major and done my prerequisites, had a blast because my senior year at UT, that's when I had to finish out my liberal arts prereqs. It was a biobot. The bio major, we call them biobots because they all like, I'm going to medical school and whatever.
Yeah.
And it was the most fun. Like you could actually like your full creative side come out. I took a class on like it was like Norse mythology, but also like how these these tales and these folklore. That's right. How folklore was a type of history. We dove all into it, and it really touched on some sci-fi authors I'd read as a kid, and I was just like, could have done this all day, right? And so I'm like, so your kiddo, they decide to go to med school, do the prerequisites. They're not committing themselves, right? They can do that fine arts, whatever they want to do, and then if they want to be a doctor, great. And they'll take you in a heartbeat as long as your grades are there.
Right. Well, I appreciate you, and I appreciate that, you're so honest about not only where you've been and how you've gone through the whole process, but you're so authentic with every person that you meet. Like I feel like that's your thing is and I truly think that you were made. God purposely put you here to help people heal and get them on the right path. And I feel like Not every physician, I'm just going to say I have stories. There's not every physician is that way. And it's really refreshing, especially today, because, you know, I feel like everything I learned about nutrition and all the things that have been kind of blown out of the water. And I'm like, golly, it's just such a broken system. So it gives me hope that you're out here working and helping patients. So thank you for what you're doing. And I'm sure it was probably a pay cut, but I pray that you have whatever it's franchises or whatever it is, all your multiple locations throughout Texas would be amazing, because everybody deserves the kind of care that you give. So thank you, thank you,
So
thank you.
much. So,
Well, thank you for being on and taking the time too. And I don't want to take too much more of your time. So I just want to say to everybody out there, like, what a great example Dr. Cashio is to all of us, that no matter what you're doing, you can change. Did you see all the hops he made? Like, you can change. You don't have to stay in the same field that you're in now. You don't have to stay in the same job. You can reinvent yourself. You can find the next phase. You can evolve, and you can do it in an amazing way. And I think what you said, Dr. Cashio, is so important. Like, remembering who you are and your purpose here is the key. As long as you're doing
yeah.
that piece, right? Then you can do anything. You can do anything through that. And so I just want to encourage everybody, if you have a dream in your heart, remember that God put it there, and therefore he's giving you everything you need in order to accomplish it. And all you really have to do is visualize it and believe in yourself, and just take that next step. The next step. It doesn't have to be, all the steps. Just take the next step towards that, and just keep pointing yourself in that direction. I promise you'll get there. I believe in you. Thank you for listening. We so appreciate it. Don't forget to click the like button and subscribe, and send it to a friend if you don't mind. We would love for some people in the medical field to be encouraged by this podcast specifically. So thank you guys so much. Have a great day.